Well, if you are just joining us, if you have any questions about OASIS Plus or Sand, Ham, or Pink Patrick's Day, please feel free to put those in the chat. I do have two quick topics that we're going to cover today, just related to some things that are going on, but happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Kylie is here with me. We both have a version of the RFP open, so we can do quick searches. We can zoom in on things that you have questions about or concerns about and talk through your specific situations. Change the names to protect the innocent. Happy to help out here.
Also give another icebreaker story. Oh, we've got one question. Has the Q&A been released?
No, it has not. Much to everybody's, I don't know, annoyance, disappointment. You can insert an adjective of your choosing here. No, we have not seen any Q&A back, which I think is a little bit unusual given that it's been out for 2 months. They do have FAQs posted from phase 1. However, many of the questions that we're fielding really relate to the specifics of how projects from phase 1 apply in phase 2. So obviously not a ton of help there. So I know I have submitted, I think I'm up to 12 questions just as situations come up and we go, it really doesn't say here what's going on. But the short answer is no, we've not seen Q&A back from GSA yet. Great question.
One of the things, obviously, that we're dealing with is the migration from, or rather what the government is dealing with is the migration from FPDS into SAM. And we just saw them host a kind of webinar live assist with how to read SAM.gov records and how they're updating the system to, have the FPDS functionality. So I can imagine that within the context of their own offices, they've got to get through the first part of the process before they can update OASIS Plus, which is dependent on SAM.gov's functionality.
Yeah, that's being very generous.
But also, get your job done.
I feel like giving them a little bit less grace because they knew this was coming and they knew that this was a big portion of how people substantiate their credits. And so I don't know, I think I'm just in Q1 of this year, calendar Q1 of this year, just not having it. We got things to do. We got projects we want to get to.
I just love how beautiful FPDS was.
I know. Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit and what we recommend right now based on what we know.
Okay, we've got another question, which is, what is the best way to show the number of FTE if it is not listed in the SAL or PWS, and the award document just shows total hours for each annual CLIN?
Yeah, so I think you have a couple options here. Number one is getting a JP3 signed, right? You can basically do the math. There is a formula that's outlined in the RFP, because I think the FTE equivalent is 1,912 hours, right? That's what they've defined an FTE as. So you could include a cover sheet on your contract documentation that, in addition to tagging your document, says, here's the total number of labor hours. If you divide by the number that you gave us in the solicitation, it equals this amount. And you could kind of give them those breadcrumbs for it, and or get a JP3 signed along with it. Now, I will say, you have other options though too, right? Because remember, the FTE count is in the same category as dollar value. So if you're trying to show scale based on FTEs, that's always going to be just a little bit trickier than having a straight calculation. But just remember that is a one or the other kind of point scoring thing, right? So don't spend too much time tracking that down if you're already getting points for scale, because you won't get more points for also having the FTEs, right? It's really, you have to demonstrate, you have to choose which method you're going to use to demonstrate and kind of stick to that for that project. And I see the next question coming in. The other thing that you can think about doing is if you are trying to show FTEs and the hours aren't spelled out, but you have a contract deliverable that indicates your different LCATs and your staffing requirements, right? That might be something that you submit in conjunction with something else to show, hey, here's the people we have, here's the positions we're filling. It's just keep in mind with that, there's always a caveat, right? Keep in mind with that a labor category does not automatically equate to an FTE. So you might have somebody who maybe is a fractional program manager, right? Or who's there for part-time. So it's not a one thing on its own. If it's not clearly articulated in the RFP, it may not be a one document solution. It might be two pieces of evidence combined, give the government the whole picture of what's going on. Okay, if you have subcontractors, are you required to submit our teaming agreements? And I would like to ask a follow-up question to that so that I answer it correctly. Is that if you have a subcontractor on a project that you're using as a qualifying experience, or a subcontractor on OASIS Plus for your submission? Let's see if I can, so I'll give you a moment to. Subcontractors on OASIS Plus contributing. Yes, you do need a teaming agreement. You have to basically, it's really it's a letter of authorization is kind of the way to think about it, right? Where they say, hey, we have, and I actually encourage you to include a little bit more information. There's a couple things that you need for this. This is a great segue into one of the points that we were going to cover today. But what we recommend people do is you get a letter that says, I am aware that the prime is using this project with this contract number as a QP for their bid on the OASIS Plus in response to solicitation, blah, 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 in domain, blah, blah, blah. And that's not even for GSA's benefit. That's for your benefit as a teammate or prime, to make sure that everybody has written down and said, I know that this project is going to be used on the small business T&E domain. And so I'm not giving it to any other team. Because remember, if the project appears on the same domain and same IDIQ, it gets removed from all proposals basically and will not be considered. So there is a letter you should submit, and then there's also an attachment. We can just jump into. I'm actually going to skip ahead since we're there. We'll come back to these things, but with the, I know hopefully this isn't super teeny tiny, but the JP7, it's got a little bit of a misnomer because it says that it's a CTA qualification template, and that's part of what it is, but it's also for like subcontractors and meaningful relationship commitment letter type stuff. So if you're using somebody else's work or certification or whatever it happens to be for credit, it needs to get listed in this document when you submit. So you kind of have two pieces of admin that you need to do in addition to project documentation, verification, all that kind of stuff that goes in.
All the other admin.
Yeah, all the other admin. Just do all the admin. Yeah, great question though. By the way, you also will need their reps and certs. So, because the government's going to look at whether you're large or small, the government's going to want to make sure that you are in fact teaming with a legal entity that is up to date on things and has got a complete record as it relates to their SAM.gov entry. And if you're a small business, just keep in mind that restriction where everybody needs to basically be similarly situated in terms of size in order to be eligible for all of the CLINs that fall under the domain that you're bidding on. Because if you have somebody that is not considered a small business in any of those NICS codes affiliated with the domains, you will not be awarded those CLINs on your contract. So good stuff. Okay, well, I'm going to run us backwards now through the slides. So yeah, the two things that we really wanted to talk about today were the new documents that aren't really new, but it might be changed from phase one. And then the whole migration of FPDS to SAM.gov, which if you're somebody like me who doesn't even like it when things in the grocery store move around, you're probably not loving this transition. And you're in a safe space here. I know why they did it. I know why it was coming. It's just taking a little bit of getting used to. And there are some actual challenges with it. So I just want to talk through some of those today. So first things first, If you try to go to fpds.gov, it's going to reroute you to, hopefully you guys can see this. Sorry, my screen is super teeny tiny, so I hope it's not as teeny tiny for you. But it will reroute you to sam.gov/contracting. And once you're here, the way to actually find the contract awards that you're looking for, it took me like a day to figure this out, right? Because on the FPDS record, it said, you then go to the data bank. And so I'm like clicking on data bank and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. And it's not as intuitive. But if you go to this, if you type in fpds.gov, it takes you to this landing page. And then if you go down to the search domain section, you can see the drop down. My cursor is actually highlighted on contract opportunities, but you want the thing below that that says contract awards. So this is the first step to get there. Now, downside, and one of the reasons we miss FPDS is now, since it's in sam.gov, you have to sign in and do your multi-factor authentication. And so for this reason, I do recommend kind of using a project tracker or something else to do all of your SAM searches at once so that you don't have to, walk away from the computer, grab a cup of coffee, come back, log back in, do that. Like, it's going to extend the project time if you're not efficiently organized when you go to do your research. So the other way to get to this is if you're already logged into sam.gov, let's say you're just in there looking for other opportunities. If you go to the search menu, you can click on a button that says contracting. And then from there, you need to click on another button that says contract awards. This is where most of your research is going to be done, right? Just for the purpose of substantiating periods of performance, contract value, things like that. And then one thing I have noticed is that if your contract has ended and the record is closed, you need to select inactive as well. Otherwise, when you search for your task order number, nothing will come up and go, I know this exists. Where is it? It's probably because you haven't selected inactive. So if you have a project that has closed that you're trying to pull a record for, make sure you select inactive. Now, downside of sam.gov. In FPDS, you could print a PDF. It would give you not a beautiful, but a usable, 2 to 3 page document when you went to export the record. There's not a clean way to do that right now in sam.gov. So if you are downloading this record for the purpose of using it for OASIS Plus, you need to print it and you need to scale it down. And if you scale it down to about 50%, that tends to be a pretty manageable file size or number of pages, depending on your contract. What is good, bad, or otherwise about the way that it's going to do this is when you go to print the record, on that last page, it's going to have every modification listed in one place. So in FPDS, those all would have been separate records, right? In sam.gov, you're going to be able to see like, okay, this is modification number 26. So that's the reason we recommend scaling down the actual record on the files or on the page size when you go to print, because if you did have something that was in existence for a lot of years and had a lot of mods on it, you're going to have that what am I trying to say? The audit trail basically of every change that's happened, and that can extend your record by a couple pages if it's a long one. Now, there's a little bit of a philosophical debate about how much time you should even invest in doing this, right? Because we know that GSA, we know through the grapevine that GSA is working on updated guidance, but as everybody knows, there can be plot twists in government contracting. So we are operating under the assumption that the sam.gov record is going to replace FPDS in the solicitation, just in terms of when you need to submit it as a record, right? Or what you're permitted to prove on it. But there are still some unknowns just because the records get displayed a little bit differently. So one example is if you look at funding agency in sam.gov, that's going to show the basically the higher tier or the governing tier of the funding agency. So if you did something for the Navy that would have normally showed up in FPDS as being under 1700, when you look at that record in sam.gov and you go to the funding agency section, it's probably going to say Department of Defense 9700. And down under funding agency, it may not say the 1700. That might be listed as a subcontracting agency, but that's not even consistent on every single record that I've pulled, because I've been doing a lot of comparison for the FPDS records that I do have just from historic bids and work that we did leading up to February 26th. and comparing those against what's displayed in SAM.gov, and there are differences. So I just want you to be aware of that, and we do expect guidance forthcoming from SAM.gov, or from GSA rather, about how they want people to use those records. What I'm hoping is that they give us, just like they did, excuse me, with the FPDS report, I'm hoping that they give us a marked up SAM.gov record that shows, okay, for funding agency, here's what we want you to tag. And for, period of performance is pretty straightforward. But there's even just little minor variations in how they display like total contract value and total amount obligated. So I do think they're going to have to give bidders some updated guidance so that we make sure we're doing exactly what they say. Because as you know, government contracting and responses to proposals, that's not the time to have creative interpretation around, it's just really hard to read the minds of the evaluators. And I know they want to be consistent and they want to be fair. And I suspect that's one of the delays in the Q&As. They're probably readjusting to that and wanting to get the guidance out, because a lot of people have asked, including us. So fun stuff.
See, you're graceful for them too.
Yeah, I'm trying to be. I will tell you that if you want to, so here's a good example. And if you can see on the screen, you see the little at the top right corner where it says actions and it's the blue circle with the 3 dots. If you're doing a generic search for like your company's task orders, that is something that you can export. Like, so you could download that as a PDF or as an Excel, and it'll show you the results of that search, but it's not something where you can export an individual record. It might be helpful for you to do that if you're trying to say, hey, did I have a contract that was of a certain value, or I think I had something for the Navy, you might be able to look through that, but it's not all of the fields that you were able to download in FPDS. So for example, you won't get a start date and an end date column. You'll get a date signed column. You will see the IDV, you'll see the task order or the delivery order, basically the project number. You'll see the funding agency as listed in SAM.gov. You'll see the prime performer. So you will see a lot of what was able to be exported from FPDS, but you won't see all of it. So, but if you're looking to make a download en masse, this is kind of the only way to do it. So you could search by company or you could search by IDIQ, but again, it's only going to export the search results. It's not going to export the individual records. So fun stuff. Okay, and then, like I said, just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the newer or updated things that came out with the package. And this is just a list of the attachments from the small business IDIQ as a for instance, right? So we already talked a little bit about that JP7, that CTA qualifications template. Just know that that might apply to your bid, even if you're not bidding as a CTA. So like I mentioned, if you have a Merkle or if you have a teammate, if you're using somebody else's thing for credit on your proposal, you probably need to fill this out. And there's 3 sections to it, and you need to read the instructions at the top of each section to know what applies to your specific bid. The other thing that's new is this JP13, the financial data input template. So on phase 1, you had to submit basically some financial records. You still have to do that in phase 2, but then you have this additional sheet that just kind of summarizes some of the fields that are going to that's going to be derived from the financial records you're also submitting. So this is kind of a standardized summary sheet that's going to show GSA everybody's information all in the same format, so they can get through things hopefully a little bit quicker. And then obviously, the other thing that did not exist in phase 1 that does now exist in phase 2 is this lateral springboard summary sheet, where you need to provide information about what's changed, what's updated, if everything's still current. And this would be if you're trying to go from, let's say you were a small business, you were awarded a small business contract under OASIS Plus phase 1, and since then you've become a woman-owned small business, you could use this lateral springboard sheet to basically apply for different socioeconomic IDIQ. I'll just tell you, we also have a few questions in about this because there's just some gray spots in what's permitted and what's not, and what they expect you to update if there have been changes. So more to follow on those topics.
I'm excited about the financial data input template just because, between some of our clients, we've seen some really disparate financial records that lead to a lot of questions. And so having one consolidated thing, I think it's going to be really useful for you guys.
Yeah, I think it's going to help answer the question of, this is what I have, is it good enough? Because if you're able to pull the information that goes into that template from your records, it's probably okay. Just keep in mind with that, GSA is asking for basically closed and audited books if available. It's March of the calendar year, so I know a lot of businesses are still closing out taxes and you may not have your books closed from 2025. I get it. Make sure you take a look at the solicitation in terms of what's required and what the 3-year period covers. Just know that it also might change based on what your company's reporting calendar year is, or financial calendar is. Like a lot of companies go January to December, but not every company does. So there might be additional requirements, or you might just want to put, like, guys, don't underestimate the importance of a cover letter. If you think something is hard to understand on its own, especially if it's for company documentation, I'm not giving you permission to deviate from the solicitation, but I am giving you permission to put a cover letter on that just helps explain why something looks the way it does. So no reason.
A cover
no reason
letter is like just like the JP3, but for your company information. You can always supplement what you're submitting with a beautiful cover letter that sums it all up for everybody.
Yep. And then I did just want to talk real quickly. I know we talked about this last time, but in case you didn't come for that session, in case you need the reminder, this is taken directly from the RFP in terms of what counts as evidence for your qualifying project documentation. And please note that this does say you shall submit the signed copy of the original contract award document for your projects, if it's federal prime experience, right? Or if it's a subcontract, you need to have the subcontract, and it really needs to be signed by the prime and your company if you were the sub. Pay attention to the types of forms that are permissible. I know they have that other official government award form section down there, but the whole reason this comes up is because all of your QPs and all of your FEPs are supposed to be contracts that were competed under FAR Part 37. So if you have an SF 330, for example, which is an architecture and engineering contract award form, that technically does not meet the definition of what you need for this qualifying project experience or your federal prime experience. So just make sure that you take a look down at the bottom right corner of your little government form and make sure that it's an SF 1449 or an SF 30 or an SF 26 or one of the more recognizable service contract award forms. And if you need help determining whether or not your project is okay to use, let us know, because I will say if you're relying on a NICS code alone to verify anything, you probably need another set of eyes on it. Because even though we have that whole attachment that is, on my previous slide here, even though we have that automatic relevance Excel sheet, there's still limitations on when that applies. And just having something coded as 541330, for example, does not necessarily prove that it was automatically T&E or that it was automatically a services contract, even though it says services in the NICS code description. So you might have a little bit more homework to do on that. And I just saw another question pop in. Have to choose the contract type. Yeah, where do you, well, yeah, so the research that I've done around figuring out if something is for services, there's a couple ways to do it. Number one is if you have an SF 1449, if you have a statement of work, or if you have a performance work statement and you have anything in that SAO or PWS that says this is a contract for services, you could tag that, and that would be part of your justification for having it be a service-based contract under FAR Part 37. Short of that, you could go to the original solicitation, right? Because it'll say, and it should say in the original solicitation for the government contract, this is being competed under FAR Part blankety blank, and hopefully it says FAR Part 37 there. If you don't have that, and you don't have a PWS that makes it abundantly clear, or if you're not sure if it's abundantly clear, then you can look at the sam.gov record. And I'm gonna just do a quick little search here so I tell you the right field. But basically, you're going to see if PBA, performance-based acquisition, there's a field that says, if it says yes, where PBA services were used, you can tag that and say that this is supporting that it was services contract. And that's actually based on the FAQ from phase one. Because we've had to go back and do that and say, hey, how do we show that this was services and not stuff? But really that's what we're trying to show, right? Is so if you can show that people were doing work that was not architecture, engineering, construction related, there's usually a pretty quick path to showing that it was FAR Part 37. But just know that many contract award forms will not say FAR Part 37 anywhere on them. It's really unhelpful. So the next best thing is to show this is another instance where you might tag the PSC code and the NICS code, not for automatic relevance purposes, but just to say, like, look, clearly this was a contract for professional services because we delivered professional services, right? Like, it's really easy in the management and advisory domain because it's all people and skills and knowledge around specific services. These are services, but this is about the drop-down symphony. So, okay, yeah, because thanks for that clarification. There's a couple different things in symphony, right? Because I think it's FAR Part 16, maybe. There's one where it's like, oh, was this a multiple award task order under this FAR part or this FAR part? I have some opinions about this. I'm going to caveat it because they are opinions. Most of what you guys are doing, it's going to be a multiple award task order, and it's going to be the first option, right? There's, yeah, let me log into Symphony because we can just have this conversation in real time.
I got it. I'm pulling it up. There's
Awesome, thank you.
several. So there's commercial and other types. You'll see state, commercial projects, first tier, other than subcontractor, first tier small business subcontractor. But then with the U.S. federal government types, you'll be able to select a standalone contract that covers FAR 12, 13, or 15, a task order that's FAR 16, a task order from an MAIDQ that's FAR 16, IDIQ task order, indefinite delivery task order, and a variety of other task orders. And so you'll just select the thing that applies most applicably to the project you're looking at. And there's tons of choices all the way down.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind here is that Symphony gets used for more than one. Yeah, we're gonna keep pulling through it on this. Don't worry. Symphony gets used for more than one type of proposal submission, right? So just because it exists as an option doesn't necessarily mean it's a distinction that you have to make on this contract, which is really unhelpful, right? Because how do you know what's required and what's not required? Like, why is there a locations field if locations is not a supporting element for most people? So I have to click through all the things. When we looked it up, the 1501-1 and 16.504, that is the majority of what we see with things like seaport contracts. They tend to fall under that task order under a multiple award IDIQ with that FAR part. Again, if it doesn't say in the solicitation, then we can take a look at your documents and see if we can pull it from anywhere else. But most of the services type contracts fall under 501-1 and 16.504. The the other one that's an option, that's 16.502. I think that relates more to firm fixed price. But I think it's not an absolute, like, it will always be this in this case and always be this in another case. So this is where it turns into a little bit more of an academic conversation, where if they're going to score the same way, no matter which FAR part they fell under. And the important part is that it's a task order on a multiple award IDIQ, whether it was 16.503 or 16.501 or 504. If they don't give you guidance on how to select that or what the implication is of selecting the wrong one, it's probably a non-issue, which I know is not a super satisfying answer. But just know that for most of what we see tends to be that first option, that 16.501-1 and 16.504. The 16.503, I'll do a little bit more research after this. Or sorry, I guess it's actually the 502 and the 503. Like I said, I think it's more of a generally applies in these circumstances, but it's not an absolute definition. And so really, if you can't find it in your solicitation and you can't find it in your contract award, then I would go with the first one and then have GSA prove you wrong, which I don't think we're going to do. Because it's not like you would earn, it's not like one's eligible and one's not. They're both eligible in this context. It just relates to the kind of the contract structure. So, good question though. What other questions do we have? And I'm actually going to stop. I'm going to attempt to stop sharing my screen and try to share just my Symphony window, so people can see what we're talking about here.
I thought you were just sharing your beautiful face, but Symphony window's fine too.
Symphony, yeah. Whoops. My beautiful rain-soaked face, because it does rain a lot in paradise. Okay, so this is where the question comes from. Is when you're, logged into Symphony, and you're typing in the name of your project and then selecting the type of contract below. So like Kylie said, you have your commercial ones up front. So this would be where you do your state, your local, your subcontract experience, if you were a first tier subcontractor, right? And then it gets into the federal government contract types, and you can select. What does matter is if you select single award versus multi-award IDIQ. That is a really important distinction. Only because if it's a single award IDIQ, you can aggregate and use a collection of task orders. If it's multiple award, that tends to be a standalone project. And then also, if you're trying to get credit for something in a competitive environment, it has to be on a multiple award IDIQ. So do make sure that you are looking from that standpoint. But it's really, the question was about, does it matter if I select 501-1 and 504, or if I select 502 or 503, right? So the multiple award ID, well, and the 502 is for indefinite delivery, definite quantity. So I think that's the firm fixed price type. But again, they don't necessarily care about the competition type or the pricing structure of the contract. It's more about what was the overall type of contract for the purposes of this bid. If you're bidding on Astro, if you're bidding on Alliant, if you're bidding on something else they use Symphony for, that might actually be a distinction, because most of the drop-down fields that you see here anywhere in Symphony came about because it was a required piece of data on a specific bid. Maybe not the one we're using. It's the downside of having this universal platform. Fun stuff. And as far as I can tell, I'd be curious to know from the crowd, as far as I can tell, you have your solicitation preferences up here that you can select from a dropdown, but it doesn't change any of the views. So it's not like it filters out other things. So I don't know why they have some of these features in the user interface. I will say, if you ever have a question about something happening in Symphony, their help desk is really responsive. Now, they will not answer questions about the solicitation. So if you say, hey, is this permissible? They're going to say, oh, that's not for us to answer. That's for GSA. But if you are asking something about a user interface thing here, I've had really good success in getting them to respond in a helpful way. And it might just be another avenue to consider if you do have something that's a little bit more solicitation based, is if you frame that question in terms of, I'm trying to upload my proposal correctly. I want to make sure that I'm selecting the right thing. You might get a little bit of an assistance, or it's the other the other thing to think through is if Symphony gets 100 questions that are all about one thing, they might also give that feedback to GSA and make sure that they're tracking a limitation with the system there. So we do always encourage being a little bit of a squeaky wheel, because they can't penalize you for asking the question. So, or if you don't want to submit it, send it to me. I send them questions all the time. I'd be happy to do it on your behalf.
They're super nice.
They are. Yeah. And yeah, we got confirmation. It doesn't change anything for anybody else either when you select those. So makes you feel good. But okay. I think we're at time. I think we filled that full 30 minutes. That was good. Good stuff. I will do a little bit more research and just see if there's anything more definitive we can find. I spent some time going down that rabbit hole around the 16 part 16 sections earlier, but really it doesn't seem to make any difference in terms of the evaluation side of OASIS Plus. So yeah. Otherwise, I think we're going to chat again in April. We might do another one of these. I did not talk to Kylie about this, so I'm off script at this point. We'll do another one of these if we get Q&A. We'll probably just try to do a quick recap what you need to know I mean, they have to publish them at some point, right?
I mean, it'll probably be in April, so we'll just see
It'll
when it's in
be
April.
it'll be the day after we do our next one, or it'll come out tomorrow. So yeah,
Or the morning of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. I think they have a little tracker that says, Rebecca and Kylie are doing a webinar. Let's change it. So yeah. All good. Well, thanks very much for coming. We'll get this recording posted. Feel free to email your questions in, or you can tag us on LinkedIn, shoot us a note. Happy to answer as best we can any questions that you have around this one. Okay, take care, everybody.